The Anthony Weiner story keeps on giving. It just keeps on coming. Today, the news is that the Democrats themselves are asking for him to get out. The House Democratic leadership, according to the New York Times, has launched an orchestrated effort to force Representative Anthony Weiner to resign. Nancy Pelosi says the Times is especially furious. Well, you know, she should be. I don't know if you remember, but when she got into office as leadership, as Speaker, one of the first things she wanted to do was reform the ethics of the House. Good luck to her. Anyway, she has concluded that Weiner is too much of a problem. And Representative Allison Schwartz of Pennsylvania called on Weiner to resign also yesterday. And New York Democrats could also attempt to eliminate his congressional district. By the way, this is the story behind the story, or one of them. It's one of the stories upstate as well. You remember recently in upstate New York, there was a Representative Lee who had to resign for the indiscretion of texting or twittering with his shirt off, which, let's face it, pales by comparison to what Weiner has been doing with his wiener online. And anyway, this guy, Representative Lee, had to resign because he had a lot of pressure from his own party, and he's a Republican, because what he was doing was not considered to be appropriate. So in his place, a campaign ran of two women and a third man. And remember that it became a referendum about the Medicare proposal being put forward by the Republicans in Congress with respect to basically divvying up Medicare into privatization. You remember what I'm talking about. And the woman that won, a Democrat, won, and this has been viewed by a lot of the press as a rejection of the Republican plan to break up Medicare as we know it. Well, the story behind the story is that that seat may not exist for too much longer, because in comparison to other states, New York has lost people. We in Connecticut are lucky that we're going to keep the 5 seats we have. Last time around in the last census, we lost a seat. We used to have 6 congressmen, now we only have 5. Well, New York is estimated to lose 2. So what they could do is carve out Weiner's district from under him. In which case, after next year, there's no question about who's going to run because it won't matter. It's moot, as we say. But it's interesting nonetheless about this Weinergate thing, because he is still adamant that he's not going anywhere. And the worst thing about it is, I mean, not only is it gross because as of yesterday, we know that Andrew Breitbart, who was on the show, by the way. If you want to hear my interview with him, you can go on lisawexler.com. He was just on the show a few weeks ago. He was on Opie and Anthony's show, and he showed them in the studio a picture, a photo of Anthony Weiner's private parts that was texted to him by the person who blew the whole thing wide open. Some group that's been following Weiner on Twitter, a Christian conservative group that's been on the alert about Weiner's tweets and alerted women to not tweet with him. So this was only a matter of time before this thing blew wide open. Anyway, in that Opie and Anthony studio, Andrew Breitbart said, I'm going to show it to you, but I don't want it to go public. This is what Andrew Breitbart claims this morning. I saw him on the Today Show. But unbeknownst to him, they recorded or copied or photocopied the picture, and then they disseminated it for everybody to see. So it's a lot worse, really, than even the kind of salacious stuff that we saw, because after all, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Am I right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. That picture may not be worth 1,000. Maybe it's worth 250. Maybe it's worth 10. I didn't see the picture. So Anthony Weiner, his behavior, he's not suffering any consequence for his behavior. This is what bothers me. If you in the private sector, if you worked for a company, name a company, Coca-Cola, IBM, PepsiCo, Joe Schmo Dry Cleaner, and you had a name and reputation that extended, in other words, your company's name and reputation went out the door when you went out the door, it's on your business card, and you engaged in this kind of behavior, you'd be fired. Go look in the employer's manual. I'm sure we have it here at Cox Radio. There are certain things you're not allowed to do. They are morally repugnant. They are moral turpitude, whatever they are. You know them when you see them, right? This kind of behavior is that way. It is. It's gross, disgusting behavior, whether or not he's married or not, to me. If you saw the commentary, I'm not going to repeat it here because it's very graphic and it borders on the obscene. And it shows him to be a person who not only has such poor judgment, but who opened himself to blackmail. This is a world in which we are a very rich country. We're a very powerful country. There are a lot of people that want something from the people that are leaders of this country. There are a lot of temptations for those leaders. There is bribery that goes on. There is special interests and lobbying that goes on. And he was texting to strangers. Those strangers could have threatened him. I will make this public unless you do so-and-so, unless you vote a certain way, unless you take a certain position. I will make this public. Do you not think that this poor judgment compromised his behavior as a public official? To me, it's so obvious, but it needs to be said. This behavior that he did was not only the kind of poor personal judgment that people use in their personal lives all the time, in which case I would question their personal judgment, but because he's a congressman, he was playing with fire. It's like he was looking to get caught. By the way, he stopped tweeting to that Christian group for a while because he was on to them and they were on to him, and then he went back to tweeting to them. So psychologically, that tells you the man was compulsive, the man was obsessive, the man had a real problem, has a real problem. But now the problem is compounded by the fact that even though everybody knows about his problem, he still doesn't think he needs to get off the stage. He is still under some kind of delusion that he can serve public office honorably and put this quote-unquote mistake behind him. How do we know that he hasn't already been bribed and already been blackmailed and already been compromised based on his activities? He admits they've gone on for years. How do we know what votes have already not or been manipulated? Anthony Weiner needs to resign from public office and then let the chips fall where they may if there are investigations that ensue. And the fact that he's not hearing that message tells me volumes, again, about his character and his lack of judgment. It's like everything the man is doing is a confirmation of his poor judgment to begin with. Do you not agree with me? Do you see it this way or do you see it a different way? 203-845-3044 is our number. Tell me if you see it a different way. There was a poll that came out a few days ago that over 50% of his constituency thought that he didn't have to resign. I take odds with that poll. I don't think that's true. I've been taking my own anecdotal poll, and every person virtually that I've spoken to said he should resign. Well, maybe there's one person in the studio who has not said so, but that person is given to rolling his eyes and has become a real cynic. So he's not sure why anybody's in Washington anymore. But other people who are still gullible enough to believe that public office means something thinks that he should resign and get out of the way for somebody else who might be more competent at doing his job. Can you imagine the snickers and the whispers that will accompany any meeting with Anthony Weiner? Are you going to want to shake that guy's hand and ask him for favors? Are you going to want him to be lobbying for you when it comes to the pork barrel spending of your district? Who's going to listen to him? Who's going to make a deal with him? He's over. It's toast. What woman wants to do business with him? I mean, what domestic violence group? What civil rights group? Think about all the different special interests that really come to Congress because they need help, that he has supposedly been representing as a liberal Democrat. The man's got a sick problem. He's a sickie. He's a sickie.